No, my friends, the worst chastisement that can befall mankind is bad priests and a bad pope. In fact, if God were to send a physical chastisement, that would be a mercy, because if we're living in a state of grace, we go to heaven. The worst punishment that we can achieve, that we can receive, is having bad formation and liberal Catholicism. Liberal Catholicism, modernism, modernist Catholicism, it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to the human race. And Pope Francis is an agent of destruction in that, and innumerable souls are going to be damned because of his influence. You must pray for Pope Francis. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Pope Francis has done it again. Actually, he's probably done maybe the worst thing he's ever done in his papacy. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to pick at this point. I don't know. But if you're not aware, and I also don't like to talk about Pope Francis that much on this show. You'll notice that I don't really do that much, even though I'm accused of that, but I actually don't really. Usually I'm just trying to teach matters of Catholic tradition, but in any event, this is a springboard for teaching the truth about salvation, which Pope Francis seems to have denied with his explicit words. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it was this recent statement that he made in his trip in Asia, in Southeast Asia. And we're just going to show that here to show you that I'm not making this up. And you can judge for yourself. And I will say, as an Italian speaker, that the person who translates it absolutely perfectly, and there is no issue with it at all. Just take my word for it if you want to do that. But anyway, that's up to you. And so I'll just press play here.
Una delle cose che più mi ha colpito di voi giovani, di questi qui, no? È la capacità del dialogo interreligioso.
I'll just pause it for a second there to show you that I do know what he's saying. He said that one of the things that sort of gripped me or impressed me most about you young people is that you have the capacity for interreligious dialogue. Let's see if the translator says the same thing.
One of the things that struck me about all of you here is your ability to engage in interreligious dialogue.
E questo è molto importante.
And
this is very important.
This is very important.
Perché se voi incominciate a litigare, la mia religione è più importante della tua, la mia è la vera, la tua non è vera.
If you, in the beginnings of your conversations and debates, start to say things like, my religion is more important than yours, oh no, mine is more important than yours, that sort of thing.
Dove ci porta questo?
Where will this lead us?
Because if we start to fight amongst ourselves and saying, my religion is more important than yours, my religion is true, yours is not, where will that lead us?
Dove?
Where will it lead us?
Qualcuno risponda, dove?
Someone respond, where would it lead us? La distruzione.
E cosa così? E ci vuole litigare.
Yes, it's okay to discuss and to...
Tutte le religioni sono un cammino per arrivare a Dio.
All right, there's the money line. Tutte religioni sono un cammino per arrivare a Dio. All religions are a path to arrive at God, or a way to arrive at God. He said that in the explicit, and this is how the man will translate it.
Because every religion is a way to arrive at God.
Dirò una comparazione. Sono come diverse lingue, diversi idiomi per arrivare lì.
He said to make an example or a comparison, they're like different languages or tongues to arrive to God, speaking different religious languages, basically.
Sort of a comparison, an example would be they're sort of like different languages in order to arrive at God.
Ma Dio è Dio per tutti.
But God is God for all.
E come Dio è Dio per tutti, noi siamo tutti figli di Dio.
And if God is God for all, then we're all sons and daughters of God.
Ma il mio Dio è più importante del tuo.
But my God is more important than your God.
È vero quello?
Is that true?
C'è un solo Dio lì. E noi sono idiomi, cammino, lingue per arrivare a Dio.
There's only one God, and each of us is a language, so to speak, in order to arrive at God.
Qualcuno è Sikh, qualcuno musulmano, qualcuno hindi, qualcuno cristiano, ma sono diversi cammini.
There are different paths.
All right, so that was very explicit. Very, very explicit. There are different paths to God. There are different ways to get there. There are different paths to God. There's no ambiguity. It's just what he said. He doubled down. He even mentioned the different ones: Hindu, Sikh, Christian, etc. There are different ways to get to God. That's what he said. That's a heresy. It's called indifferentism. I'm going to read you some popes on indifferentism here. Actually, first, before I do that, I want to show you something else. So people online are saying, this is terrible. I can't believe a pope would ever do this. I tweeted something to the effect of, well, quite frankly, Pope Francis is following in John Paul II's footstep. What John Paul II did in actions, Pope Francis did in words. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to bring this up here from the internet. This is John Paul II in 1986. And this is the Assisi meeting. A lot of people don't like to talk about this, but it happened. And let me just bring this up. Okay, enough of that. So what happened there, if you're unaware, probably not if you're a trad, but if you're unaware, it was a world prayer for peace in 1986 in Assisi. And now, in theory, in technicality, I believe that if you saw them all reading the prayers that were prepared, I believe it was like some basic non-heretical prayer. I'm just trying to be honest. I think it was something like, Almighty God or Creator or whatever. And it wasn't a heresy, the actual prayer itself. But obviously that was a demonstration of the heresy of indifferentism. And if you don't believe that, then you don't understand reality. Reality, truth is, in order to understand truth, you have to conform your mind to reality. If you have eyes, if you have a brain, if your brain works, you look at that and you say, well, that looks like religious indifferentism because it's all the leaders of the different world religions, Christian and non, praying together for peace to God as if their prayers are heard by God in a pleasing way, which the church has always taught is not the case, especially maybe in the individuals who are ignorant or something, debate that, fine. But these leaders of these religions and formal heresy and schism and apostasy and whatever, this is nonsense. This is a heresy that's been talked about by a number of popes. I'm going to read you 3 excerpts here. One from Pope Gregory the 16th, and 3 from Pope Pius IX. And the reason I'm going to read 3 from Pius IX is because often people will point to a statement that Pope Pius IX made in a letter about invincible ignorance. And he did talk about invincible ignorance, but it was taken into context and he was horrified at that. And he wrote to reaffirm what he meant by that, meaning you're not culpable for your ignorance, meaning you're not punished for the ignorance in the sense that you've intentionally been ignorant if it's invincible, but you're still not saved by it. There's a distinction that has to be made there. Okay, here's Pope Gregory the 16th, and it's in a book. I'm sorry, I can't put it on the screen. I'm going to just read that for you here. He writes this. This is over 200 years ago at this point. The church is afflicted at present with indifferentism, like what Pope Francis said. This vicious manner of thinking claims that eternal salvation can be obtained by the profession of any kind of religion, provided a man's morals be good and decent. That's Freemasonry, by the way. With the admonition, and actually that's the Noahide laws for non-Jews in the rabbinical Judaism. With the admonition of the apostle that there is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, may those fear who contrive the notion that the safe harbor of salvation is open to persons of any religion whatsoever. Now, The detractors are going to say, hold on, Kennedy. He didn't say you could be saved under the religions. He just said there are different paths to God. Okay, fine. Let's just say this. I said there are many maps that you can use to arrive at your destination. Well, hold on a sec. You didn't say the different maps mean that they'll get you home. Okay, shut up if that's what you think. Without a doubt, they will perish in eternity unless they hold to the Catholic faith and absorb it whole and inviolate. That was from Morarivos, 1832, so I guess not quite 200 years ago. Let's read Pope Pius IX, shall we? This is from the encyclical Nostis et Nobiscum. We have learned of a pernicious error which has been imbibed by many Catholics, that all those can be saved who die without having professed the Catholic faith. That's from 1849. Pope Pius IX again. I condemn again that most pernicious error. I condemn again that most pernicious error. Clear enough? In which certain Catholics are living who are of the opinion that those who live in error and have not the true faith may obtain life everlasting. That's in Singulare Quadam, 1854. Pope Pius IX again in Quanto Conficiarmur Morore. We must mention and condemn again that most pernicious error, which has been imbibed by certain Catholics who believe that it is possible to arrive at eternal salvation, although living in error and alienated from the true faith and Catholic unity. Such belief is certainly opposed to Catholic teaching. The words of Christ are clear enough. He who does not believe will be condemned. Here's the main issue with this whole thing, my friends, is that a lot of people are looking to convert to Catholicism because they have a Catholic conscience. There's a lot of fallen away Catholics who want to come back. There's a lot of Catholics who were baptized and never formed. And they're looking for the truth. And they're on their way, and then they see something like this, and then for them that's a confirmation that they don't have to convert or come back, because why? Who cares? It's all different paths to God. It's like different spokes on a wheel. When I used to teach religion to grade 12 students, I used to say, people will tell you that all religions are paths up the mountain to God. And I said, no, Catholicism is the only true religion where God comes down the mountain to us. Pope Francis is a chastisement for the church. And I know those are strong words, but I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Prophets and things like that, these mystics and so forth, they talk about all these chastisements, and people love to think about the end of the world. They love to think about prepping, which I'm not against you having a bunch of guns and ammo and food if that's what you want to do. I'm not trying to throw shade here. I'm just saying people kind of take this in the literal sense of, there's going to be an explosion, or there's going to be an EMP, or there's going to be fire from the sky. The prophecy of Sister Agnes Asagawa from Japan. There's going to be, whatever, the 3 days of darkness, whatever. There's going to be something where we're going to feel it in the flesh. The chastisement's going to be a natural disaster. No, my friends, the worst chastisement that can befall mankind is bad priests and a bad pope. In fact, if God were to send a physical chastisement, that would be a mercy, because if we're living in a state of grace, we go to heaven. The worst punishment that we can achieve, that we can receive, is having bad formation and liberal Catholicism. Liberal Catholicism, modernist Catholicism, it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to the human race. And Pope Francis is an agent of destruction in that, and innumerable souls are going to be damned because of his influence. You must pray for Pope Francis. His responsibility is very, very grave. More than mine, more than yours, more than everyone on earth. He has the most important job on earth, and he's completely bungled it, and he's leading souls to eternal hellfire. And it's really, really sad. It's not a time for anger. I know that people can be angry righteously. I get that. But it's not a time for anger. It's a time for sorrow, for penance, and for prayers for that man. Because when he stands before St. Peter, who is his predecessor, that's going to be a very terrifying moment for Pope Francis, unless he repents, which he still can, which is why we must pray for him. Now, I want to get back to the matter at hand, though, because as I said, many Catholics are trying to come back to the church. Many people are trying to come back to the church. They've fallen away and so forth. And they're going to hear this nonsense, and you're going to encounter this in your lives. We're going to talk to family members or whoever, and they're going to say, look, Pope Francis, you don't have to go to your traditional Latin Mass. They're all passed to the same God. Why are you such an extremist? Why are you so rigid? I go to yoga. She goes to the psychic. He likes to hit up the mega church because they have good coffee and a bunch of video games for the kids. I don't know. I actually don't know what they do at a mega church, but I assume they have video games. And, you go to the Latin Mass, like, you're so arrogant. Stop being such an elitist. Your Pope doesn't even agree with you. How many times have you heard that? Well, Pope Francis is a heretic. So now also I should say, I know the Sedevacantists are salivating. You guys are drooling all over the floor like, like a dog before a fresh bowl of meat. I get that. But you got to relax because honestly, I'm just being honest, Sedes. You guys are like the worst salesmen in the world. And you don't have it all figured out as much as you think you do. You just got to calm down. If you want people to come over to your side, stop saying I told you so. That's like the worst possible way to get people to think that you're right. I mean, come on, have some humility. That's not all of you, but it's a lot of you. Pope St. Pius X. We declare that a great number of those who are condemned to eternal punishment suffer that everlasting calamity because of ignorance of those mysteries of faith, which must be known and believed in order to be numbered among the elect. And he was reiterating Pope Benedict XIV. Okay, so now that's obvious for non-Catholics or non-Christians. But what about other baptized Christians? Pope Benedict XIV. This is from Singulari Nobis, and this is in Denzinger Schonmetzer. This is a citation, numbers 2566 to 2568, if you're following at home in your Latin copy. A person baptized by a heretic, if he uses the legitimate manner and form, is sealed with the character of the sacrament. So heretical baptisms are true because the form and the sacrament is fine, and the matter. It is also certain that he who receives baptism in a heretical rite thereupon becomes a member of the Catholic Church. So every time a little baby's baptized at a Lutheran church, he's Catholic by force of that baptism. Indeed, the sad error of the one baptizing cannot deprive him of this happiness, if the sacrament shall have been conferred in the faith of the true church. And if her precepts are observed in those things which pertain to the validity of baptism. Suarez brilliantly confirms this in his On the Defense of the Catholic Faith Against the Errors of the Anglican Sect, Book 1, Chapter 24, where he shows that a baptized person is made a member of the church, adding even this, that if a heretic, as it often happens, should cleanse a small child as yet incapable of eliciting an act of faith, this is not an impediment. This does not prevent such a one from receiving the habit of faith and baptism. Lastly, and why it says cleanse, it means baptized. Lastly, we have to explain that those having been baptized by heretics, if they shall have come to that age in which they are able to discern good things from evil per se, the age of reason, and if they adhere to the errors of the one who baptized them, then these same are indeed cut off from the unity of the church and are deprived of all those goods which they who abide in the church enjoy. That means the sacraments, and that's how you save your soul. So that's other Christians. So we're not even talking about non-Christians here. What about heretics and schismatics in general? Pope Boniface VIII. The Lord said to Peter, "Feed my sheep." He says, "my sheep" universally, and not these or those in particular. And thus it is understood that he entrusted all his sheep to him. If therefore the Greeks or others say that they have not been entrusted to Peter and to his successors, they necessarily admit that they are not of the sheep of Christ. Since the Lord says in John that there is one fold and one shepherd. That's from Unum Sanctum, a very powerful bull from Pope Boniface VIII in 1302. Pope Gregory XVI, again from Mirarivos. With the admonition of the apostle that there is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, may those fear who contrive the notion that the safe harbor of salvation is open to persons of any religion whatever. what Pope Francis said. They should consider the testimony of Christ himself, who says, he that is not with me is against me. Pope Pius IX. There is only one see founded on Peter by the word of the Lord, and whoever abandons the see of Peter on which the church is established trusts falsely that he is in the church. That's from 1856. Pope Pius XI. In this one Church of Christ, no man can be or remain who does not accept, recognize, and obey the authority and supremacy of Peter and his legitimate successors. Mortalium Animos, 1928. Pope Pius XII. Members of Protestant sects, that's in brackets to explain the context, are wandering sheep unknown to the shepherd, limbs who are not part of a life-giving body, but separated, arid, and deprived of spiritual nourishment. That's from Sommamente Gradita, 1942. Pope Pius XII, again, this is from Mystici Corporis on the Mystical Body of Christ, amazing encyclical from 1943. Just as the true assembly of Christ's faithful is only one body, so there can be only one faith. Consequently, the one who would refuse to hear the church is, by the Lord's command, to be considered as the heathen and the publican. Hence, those who are in various ways separated in faith or rule, that means heresy or schism, cannot be living in the body. What about some saints? St. Ambrose. The Lord severed the Jewish people from his kingdom, and heretics and schismatics are also severed from the kingdom of God and from the church. The Lord makes it perfectly clear that every assembly of heretics and schismatics belongs not to God, but to the unclean spirit. Pretty strong. Talking about Christians there, not Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims. St. Cyprian. It must be understood that the bishop is in the church and the church in the bishop, and he is not in the church who is not with the bishop. Now, I know my anti-SXPX people are going to be throwing shade at me here. Just relax, okay? Have some context. We're not talking about states of necessity within the Catholic Church. We're talking about the general principles. Heresy and schism, very different things. I could keep going. I think it's very clear. There's no salvation outside the Catholic Church. It's a doctrine as serious as a heart attack. And it cannot be avoided. To avoid that doctrine and to adopt the heresy of indifferentism is a grave sin, because heresy is a sin. It is a grave sin. And in fact, you know what? I'll read something from Thomas Aquinas about the sin of heresy. So here's Thomas Aquinas talking about, what if someone denies only one doctrine of the faith, only one article, only one dogma, something you have to believe? We're not talking about disputed questions like matters of ecclesiology, certain matters, not all, certain matters, or certain interpretations of the scriptures, things like that. We're talking about articles of faith, things that have been anathematized, de fide defined, and so forth. Explicit statements in the scriptures that are clearly held by the church forever. This is St. Thomas Aquinas on whether a man who disbelieves one article of faith can have lifeless faith in the other articles. He says, just as mortal sin is, and this is from the Summa, second part, question 5, answer 3, and question 10, answer 3. Just as mortal sin is contrary to charity, so is disbelief in one article of faith contrary to faith. Now, charity does not remain in a man after one mortal sin. Therefore, neither does faith after a man disbelieves one article. Neither living nor lifeless faith remains in a heretic who disbelieves one article of faith. Whoever does not adhere, as to an infallible and divine rule, to the teaching of the church, has not the habit of faith, but holds that which is of faith otherwise than by faith. Hence, it is evident that a heretic who obstinately disbelieves one article of faith is not prepared to follow the teaching of the church in all things. Therefore, it is clear that such a heretic with regard to one article has no faith in the other articles, but only a kind of opinion in accordance with his own will. Moreover, it is not impossible for one who has a false opinion of God to know him in any way at all, because the object of his opinion is not God. Sorry, it is not possible for him to know God in any way, because the object of his opinion is not God. That's Thomas Aquinas. It's not Kennedy Hall. Remember, the Summa of Thomas Aquinas was on the altar at Trent. Anyway, we could keep going with more and more here. Well, you know what? Let's actually read another piece here, because in Pope Francis saying that they're all different paths to God, well, no, because they can't even reach God because they can't worship him. And I'll show you that here. So this is from a section of this book on the Catholic Church alone is able to honor God by offering a true and pleasing worship. Thus, he takes no pleasure in the false worship, regardless of the worshippers' well-meaning or of their sincerity in religious errors. And we should say we distinguish here between the prayer of an individual, which can be of great value toward his deliverance from errors, and the official public worship of a heretical or schismatical sect. So if Pope Francis had said, people in all religions are earnestly praying to know God, and this can lead them to God, that would actually be true. Otherwise, you would, if you're a convert, you never would have converted because your prayers would have been meaningless. I mean, if you see what I'm trying to say here. Like, if you are honest about wanting to know the truth, then God will give you the grace. And it is a de fide teaching of the church that God will give graces to all on earth to convert, every single person. And Thomas Aquinas even says, he uses the example of Peter and Cornelius from the scriptures. And he says, if a man is based in the middle of the wilderness and is of goodwill and truly desires to know God and is not putting an impediment to receiving divine grace, then he will either receive an interior kind of miraculous inspiration to have a conversion that is invisible to us, or he will have a miraculous missionary visit him, as has happened in the past. And there are many stories of that. So everyone on earth is given the grace to convert to the church. So yes, individuals in the religions, they themselves may have sincere prayers that may lead them to God, but the religion itself cannot do that. It is impossible. It is impossible for that religion to be directed towards God in any manner other than opinion about what they believe to be God, based on what we just read. Here's Pope St. Gregory the Great. Kind of a big deal. He's great, St. Gregory the Great. Now the Holy Church Universal, affirming that all they that are separated from her shall not be saved, proclaims that God cannot truly be worshipped saving within herself. And he's talking about Christians, not even talking about Hindus or whatever. Pope Pius XI, let those, and this is from Mortalium Animos, let those who are now entangled in the errors of Eastern Orthodoxy and the Protestant reformers hear Lactantius crying out, the Catholic Church is alone in keeping the true worship. This is the fount of truth. This is the house of faith. This is the temple of God. If any man enter not here, or if any man go forth from it, he is a stranger to the hope of life and salvation. Lactantius, it is therefore the Catholic Church alone which retains true worship. St. Thomas Aquinas, this is a good question. He asks this in the Summa, second part, question 93, answer 1. And the question is whether there can be anything pernicious in the worship of the true God. So, if Pope Francis is going to say their paths to God, these different religions, that must necessarily include their religious ceremonies, can there be true paths to God, including true worship to God, that has things in it that are pernicious, meaning, bad? Let's see. It is a lie if one signify outwardly that which is contrary to the truth. But just as a thing is signified by word, so it is by deed. And it is in this signification by deed that the outward worship of religion consists. I want to just hold that here for a sec. It is in the signification by deed that the outward worship of religion exists. So in fairness to Pope Francis, he said something wrong. Go back to John Paul II. They did something wrong. Consequently, if anything false is signified by outward worship, this worship will be pernicious. If anything false is signified by outward worship, this worship will be pernicious. Apply that logic to Assisi with John Paul II, those of you who think this is the first time this has happened. Now, this happens in two ways. In the first place, it happens on the part of the thing signified, through the worship signifying something discordant therefrom. And in this way, at the time of the new law, the mysteries of Christ being already accomplished, It is pernicious to make use of the ceremonies of the old law, whereby the mysteries of Christ were foreshadowed as things to come. So no Old Testament religion exists anymore. Well, that's not true. We are the same religion as the Old Testament, but the covenant is new, but it's the same religion. Just as it would be pernicious for anyone to declare that Christ has yet to suffer. In the second place, falsehood in outward worship occurs on the part of the worshiper, and especially in common worship, which is offered by ministers impersonating the whole church. For even as he would be guilty of falsehood who would, in the name of another person, proffer things that are not committed to him, so too does a man incur the guilt of falsehood, who, on the part of the church, gives worship to God contrary to the manner established by the church or divine authority, and according to the ecclesiastical custom. So there can be no true worship of God if there is something pernicious, devious, etc. in it. It cannot happen. Thus, heretics and schismatics merit nothing from the practice of their false religions. And again, we speak not in relation to their own prayers and pious practices, but rather in virtue of their formal participation in the public rites of worship or a false religion. Pope Boniface VIII. There is only one Catholic Church, and that one apostolic. Outside this church, there is no salvation and no remission of sins. Pope Gregory XVI. A schismatic flatters himself falsely if he asserts that he too has been washed in the waters of regeneration. Indeed, Augustine would reply to such a man, the branch has the same form when it has been cut off from the vine, but of what profit for it is the form, if it does not live from the root. Council of Trent. The Holy Synod teaches, this is in session 23 of this Council of Trent, the Holy Synod teaches that in the ordination of bishops, priests, and of other orders, those who by their own temerity take these offices upon themselves are not ministers of the church, but are to be regarded as thieves and robbers who have not entered by the door. St. Thomas Aquinas on baptism, St. Augustine on baptism. Just as baptism is of no profit to the man who renounces the world in words and not in deeds, so it is of no profit to him who is baptized in heresy or schism. But each of them, when he amends his ways, begins to receive profit from that which before was not profitable, but was yet already in him. Anyway, we could keep going. I think the point has been made. People have asked me about this book. It's not for sale. It's a sort of a long essay compiled by a friend of mine, and you can't get it anywhere, so sorry. There is no salvation outside the Catholic Church at all. It's an article of faith, which none of us can deny, especially not the Pope. The other religions of the world are not paths to the same God. Read the Psalms. King David talks about the gods of the nations are devils. That is de fide, truth in Scripture. What Pope Francis has done is he has led innumerable souls astray. And if he does not repent, he's going to lose his soul, just like all of us will if we commit a grave sin publicly. So we all have to go to confession for those things, and I'm not counting myself out of that. I've made mistakes in my life, and so have you. I guess I'll end this here. I think that's probably enough. Please pray for Pope Francis. Please pray for Pope Francis. And if you have family members who... Actually, pray for the people who heard this to have amnesia. I don't know. Can you pray for amnesia? Pray for the people who heard this to forget it, meaning the thing from Pope Francis. If you have family members or friends who think Pope Francis is awesome for saying that, you can send them this video. That's why I read these things verbatim, so you could share it with people. So, last thing, I am going to Italy this fall. And we're going to go see various wonderful holy sites of Italy: Rome, Assisi, the Amalfi Coast, Florence. And it's going to be quite beautiful. There's still a few spots available. You can click the link in the description area to go on that trip if you'd like. It's still open. And it's a very good deal. There's no inexpensive trip to Europe, but this is a good deal. 4 trips to Europe as far as they're concerned. There's going to be a lot of us there. It's going to be fun. And I'm excited for those of you who are already coming on the trip. It's going to be a great time. And I guess the last thing I want to say is, or the second last thing, is I'm very thankful to Archbishop Lefebvre for this time, considering what we're going through. And if you do have questions about that, you can check out my book in the description area about the Society of St. Pius X, called SSPX The Defense. And lastly, if you do want to have premium subscriber content, you can go to my Substack, meretradition.substack.com. That information is in the description area as well, where I talk about a lot of other things. And I think I'm about 3/4 done my charismatic book at this point. I'm pretty close. And it's going through the editing process. It's going really well. I've written about 140, 150 pages or so now, all told. And I want it to be under 200 because I don't want it to be huge. So it's pretty close to being done. And that's going to be released chapter by chapter in audiobook and in print, and in, not published print paper, but in digital print on my Substack. And you can get a preview of that there if you sign up. So that's all I got for you. This has been another edition of Mere Tradition. I'm Kennedy Hall. Until next time, God bless you all.